Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We're sitting here, it's early November, and we are going to talk late fall, early winter fishing. But before we get into it, I always want to remind you guys that these fishing reports are brought to you by Hatch Toyota in Cholo, Arizona. And before we go any further, just a little reminder to like and subscribe to the channel. Turn on that bell notification, and let's get into the fishing report here. So last time we talked, I was just getting back from the U.S. Open. I hadn't spent a lot of time on the water on our local lakes, but I talked a lot about what I would be doing. We talked about throwing topwater, stuff like that. And what usually happens at some point in later October is you start getting a couple serious north fronts, where the nights will start to get a lot cooler. The days, the wind blows out of the north, and it just takes those fish from like a really active, shallow fall pattern into like almost a winter pattern. And we're there now. Like we're past that. I was on the lake a lot over this past week, Roosevelt in particular, and I saw that topwater bite getting really tough. We were able to get a couple fish on a buzzbait, but the topwater bite is pretty much done. Pretty much. You can throw a buzzbait a little bit, but if you're out there to throw a walking bait or a popper, there's a lot better choices right now. I've been fishing, I've been at Bartlett, I've been at Pleasant, and I've been at Roosevelt here in the last 2 weeks. And I'm going to be fishing a lot more of all the lakes I just mentioned moving forward through the rest of November into December. So I've got some recent data for all of them. Saguaro Canyon, those lakes get so hit or miss right now. And the big reason for that is we've got a heavy Florida strain gene pool in those lakes. And those Florida strain bass, when it starts, that water gets below 70 really, but especially below 65, 60, they really kind of shut off. They feed a lot less, they get real lethargic. You can go out there and catch some bass, but it's not going to be what it is in March, April, May, all the way through, usually right around now it starts to get real tough. And then by the time you get to Thanksgiving on Saguaro Canyon, the swim baiters are going to go have their fun. You can catch some fish on spoons, and I'll do that a little bit. But really to go out there and just catch a bunch of fish, it's a tough deal on those lakes. So really I want to focus today on Bartlett, Roosevelt, and Pleasant. Those are three lakes that they do have. Roosevelt's got some Florida strain genes in it, but really there's still a lot of northern strain blood in those fish, and they bite all winter long. So those are my three favorite lakes to fish as it gets cooler here in Arizona. You can go to the river, Colorado River, and catch fish and stuff too. But really, those three bigger lakes around Phoenix, Pleasant, Bartlett, Roosevelt, that's where I'm going to spend a lot of time. And the fish are really starting to go a lot deeper. Like, you'll always be able to catch fish up shallow. And if you're tournament fishing looking for a big bag, a lot of times shallow is still the answer. Even though most of the fish might be out deep, you still might catch your biggest fish up shallow sometimes. But right now, the numbers of fish are getting out deep. If you get out on Roosevelt and start doing some graphing and sit on these offshore places, these deeper places, you're going to see a lot of fish and maybe catch a lot of fish. When you go up shallow, there's still some fish, but not near as many. I mean, you got, in my opinion, 80 or 90% of the bass in the lake are making their way out to those deeper spots, chasing shad down in that deep water. Makes it perfect to do a couple of things that I really like to do. Before we get into the deep fishing, we'll talk a little bit about the shallow bite. I love to throw a spinnerbait this time of year. You saw in my last video at Bartlett, I was throwing this half-ounce power blade from Berkeley, painted white blades because it was so cloudy. But a lot of times I'm going to go to like a 3/4 ounce, something a little more natural. This one's got a little chartreuse, but usually like a translucent shad pattern, double willow, 3/4 ounce. That's a really good bait to throw this time of year looking for bigger bites. Still kind of in those shallower areas, but slow rolling it a little bit, not fishing it too fast. If you're sitting in 10 or 20 feet of water, you cast it to the bank and just slow roll it back. Crawl it through the trees, crawl it over the rocks. Vibrating jig is a good way to get a lot of bites if the water's got a little more color to it. Caught a 4-pounder a couple days ago up at Roosevelt on a vibrating jig, so that's a great way to get bit. And then cranking. I don't have any crankbaits right here with me that I pulled out, but any type of cranking is going to be effective this time of year, whether you're shallow cranking, shad pattern, or even all the way down to a deep diver. Crankbaits, they work all winter long, and now is an ideal time to throw them. You know, one thing, when I was at Lake Pleasant, I fished a tournament out there with my buddy Alex a couple weeks ago. The water had a lot more color than normal. I think the late effect of those late monsoons really still has the water pretty stained up out there. And anytime you get stain in the water, you know, whereas you might throw an Alabama rig or a swim bait, if it's clearer, going to a crankbait or a vibrating jig when the water gets dirtier, those fish can feel that pulsating of the bait a lot better in that dirtier water, and you're going to have more success. All these reaction baits we're talking about, they're going to be better if you have some wind. If it is slick, calm, no wind, post frontal, a day like we actually dealt with a couple days ago at Roosevelt, once that sun's out, you're better off fishing deeper or slower. But again, early in the morning, if you have a little bit of a breeze or if you have dirtier water, all great windows and opportunities to throw those reaction baits. As we move deeper, as we target those fish that are a little further off the bank, sitting in deeper water, one really good way to find them is an underspin. This is a Berkeley underspin right here. It's got a 4-inch minnow on it. And what I love to do with this thing, the fish do get pretty channel oriented this time of year in the fall. And it's a great way to go catch fish on all of our lakes is you get in the middle of the channels and basically, you know, you can graph around and look for bait, look for fish. But, you know, if you feel like you're around some fish, especially suspended fish, this is a great way to catch those bass. Put your boat in the middle of the channel or the ditch or whatever, cast it out, let it fall all the way to the bottom. And that might be in 10 feet, it might be in 40 feet. And then just slowly reel it all the way back up through the water column. You know, when you're doing that, you're coming through the entire water column. So you're bound to intercept some fish no matter what depth they're at. If you've got live scope, it's a huge bonus, right? Because you can really pinpoint those fish, put it in front of them. But even if you don't have live scope, before the days of live scope, I was doing this. Get in the channel, cast it out, let it sink to the bottom, and just reel it all the way back up through the water column. And eventually you'll start to figure out, okay, I'm getting bit, you know, at X amount of feet. Then you might be able to actually cast it out, count it down to that depth, and retrieve it at that depth. But, you know, you got to start out by fishing all the depths. That's really the best way to do it. And this is a good way to search these big gulches, the bays, the channels, stuff like that. The underspin. Once you get on them, there's no quicker and better way to catch them than a spoon. The spoon bite is like one of my favorite things on these Arizona lakes. I mean, we had an epic day this past Monday, and Tuesday and Thursday were a little sketchier. We didn't really get on a huge school like Monday, but we probably caught 70 bass on Monday at Roosevelt. And we caught most of them on jigging spoons, just like this. Jigging spoons, and this is a Berkeley snap jig. It's very similar to an ice jig, but you can see we've got a soft plastic trailer on it, and it's got a big single hook on the top. Rather than those weird kind of hooks that are on the ice jigs, I feel like you hook them better with this guy. But what you're going to do with this is you're not going to fish until you know you're around them. You can't cover any water with a jigging spoon because you're fishing it vertical. You're just dropping it straight down and hopping it. You can cast it, but really you're hopping it straight up and down. So if you're not on fish, you know, you're just sitting over dead water. I do a lot of graphing this time of year. I get behind the wheel of the boat and I start idling around. Deep flats, deep points, deep humps, and just looking. And I think it's a giant misconception out there, and I talk about it with my guide clients a lot, a giant misconception that you have to be around bait for this. Honestly, for me, I like to just be around fish. And it makes sense, right? Like, if you could be around a lot of bass by themselves or around a lot of bass that have a lot of bait with them, you're going to catch more fish if there's no bait. There's no bait fish because you're not having to compete with those bait fish. And then the other real big thing is when the bass are on shad, they're moving. They're moving quick. It's really hard to stay on them. You'll catch one or two, and then they might swim 50 yards. And by the time you catch another one, they swim another 100 yards different direction because they're chasing the shad underwater. I like to find bass that are sitting, honestly, dormant on the bottom by themselves, because if you can get that school fired up, it's just you and the bass. You are creating the feeding frenzy, and your spoon is the center of attention for all those bass. Whereas if you were around a bunch of balls of shad, those bass are distracted by the shad. They're swimming all over the place. So easier said than done. The fish are not that easy to graph, when they're sitting on the bottom in 30, 40, 50 feet. You got to really pay attention to your electronics. A lot of times you might only see like 2 or 3 fish that were sitting up a little higher off the bottom because they're all glued so close to the bottom. And if you're able to catch one of those fish, there could be 100 bass down there with the others, but they were just so close to the bottom, they're hard to see. So hard bite to find, but one of the funnest, most awesome bites once you get it going. So, those are really the main ways that I'm targeting fish here in November. Again, you could do a lot of different things. You could still catch some bass flipping. You could catch them, on a drop shot, of course. Drop shot's always good. You could be throwing a jig right now, but November is that time when the fish are really starting to stack up out deep. The spoon, the snap jig, the underspin, those are great ways to catch them. And then again, the spinnerbait, vibrating jig, crankbaits if you're going shallower, but you can really put the topwaters away. I mentioned it in my video last week, fishing in the rain. You can keep some buzzbaits in the boat for the right day. Another bait I didn't mention is an A-rig. That's going to work on all of our lakes too. And it goes for all of them. Pleasant, Bartlett, Roosevelt. It's a real similar deal on all those lakes. The fish are very schooled up right now. So if you go out and you have a great day of fishing, you might have fished for 8 hours and not caught fish for 7 of the 8 hours. But that 1 hour where you caught fish, you caught a lot of fish. And that's what I love. I love fishing for that big school, that needle in a haystack. And this is the time of year. Hope you guys can get out and enjoy some fishing over the next month. The holidays are coming. It's a great time of year. So I do have a couple dates left open here. The guiding I do is pretty limited. I was lucky enough to get to meet several of you guys that watch these videos and fish with you since the last one I did. I've taken out a handful of guide trips. So I've got a few more openings in December. If you guys want to get out, make sure to send me an email. It's azangler@gmail.com, all lowercase, azangler@gmail.com. You could also send me a message on Instagram or Facebook. But anyways, enjoy the rest of the month. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you guys real soon.